Imagine stumbling across a grainy black and white video late one night, the kind where the stage lights shine a little too brightly and the singers look almost ghostly in old-fashioned suits. You see a tall, folksy gentleman with a warm smile, his hair ginger-tinged under the stark lights, stepping up to a microphone. He's about to sing a country tune you might never have heard, or maybe it's a gospel standard you know by heart. But from the first note, there's a special sincerity that draws you in. That man is Red Foley, one of the most influential yet often overlooked pioneers in country music. If you've never heard the name, buckle up for a journey back to a time when radio was king, national variety shows were just emerging, and a humble Kentuckian with a soulful baritone voice was changing the very shape of American music. He was born Clyde Julian Foley on June 17, 1910, in a place called Blue Lick, near Berea, Kentucky, almost like a detail out of a folk song. The name alone evokes images of old country roads and rolling hills. Life in small-town Kentucky was no novelty. Families made do with farms, local gatherings, and plenty of front porch picking to pass the time. Foley's father, Benjamin, and mother, Catherine, both carried a love for music, passing that torch to their son early on. And just as certain families hand down heirlooms, the Foleys handed down a love for guitars and harmonicas. From the time he could walk, Clyde Julian was picking at strings, blowing chords into a harmonica, and absorbing all those rural musical traditions. It didn't take long for people around him to notice that this kid had something special, a certain natural presence. With hair blazing bright auburn, the nickname Red was inevitable. It fit him like a glove, hinting at that amiable, warm persona people would see on stage a few years down the line. Throughout the 1920s, as radio stations began popping up in larger cities and barn dance shows gained popularity, Red Foley was honing his talents. He got his first big break almost by accident. He won a local talent contest so handily that it led to a music scholarship at Georgetown College in Kentucky. Imagine being a small-town musician, used to jam sessions at neighbors' houses, suddenly getting an academic scholarship for your gift. It was a game changer, even if college life wasn't destined to be permanent for him. Like so many young artists, Foley found the classroom a bit too stifling, and the lure of the open road and professional gigs proved too strong. So he left Georgetown, stepping onto a new path where performing wasn't just a dream, it would become his entire life. By 1930, Foley had landed in Chicago, performing at small venues, clubs, and radio broadcasts. Back then, radio was everything. This was the medium that could beam a singer's voice across state lines, right into living rooms where families might huddle around to hear the music of the day. One evening, a talent scout heard Foley sing, recognized that striking baritone, and secured him a spot with the Cumberland Ridge Runners, a band featured on WLS Radio's National Barn Dance. National Barn Dance was iconic, one of the earliest, biggest radio variety shows focusing on country or hillbilly music. Joining that cast was like stepping into a fast lane of early country showbiz. Suddenly, Foley wasn't just entertaining local crowds. People from Illinois to Indiana to who knows where were listening to that red-haired boy with a voice like melted honey. But Foley's personal life soon entwined with his rising career. In 1933, he married Eva Overstake, who was sister to another singer, Judy Martin. They started a family quickly, welcoming 3 daughters, Shirley, Julie, and Jenny. On the surface, Foley had everything going for him, a successful gig in Chicago, a new family, and slowly growing fame. However, the mid to late 1930s were complicated times for everyone in the entertainment business. Pays were erratic, traveling could be grueling, and rumors had a way of ballooning when you lived life on the road. In 1940, tragedy struck. Eva ended her own life, supposedly amid whispers that Foley was unfaithful. It was a crushing personal blow, something that haunted Red Foley for the rest of his days. People who saw him perform noticed a new layer of grief or longing in his singing. You could sense that heartbreak swirling behind the notes, even if he kept a professional facade. That moment would remain a scar, influencing the man he became both on and off stage. Despite this family tragedy, Foley's recording career took off. In 1937, he signed with Decca Records, and it was a perfect match. Decca recognized that Foley's baritone was accessible to both country and pop audiences, especially in an era when so-called hillbilly music wasn't always treated seriously by mainstream record labels. But Foley's sound had a tender polish to it, bridging the gap between rural twang and the smoother pop approach. His versatility let him record everything from Western ballads to lively fiddle tunes, and even some of the sentimental pop hits of the day. By 1941, he had his first major breakthrough single, Old Shep, a story song about a boy and his loyal dog. That tune soared to the top of the country charts, cementing Foley's place as a rising star. And in the same year, he joined the Grand Ole Opry, the legendary Nashville radio show that had already launched the careers of Roy Acuff and Minnie Pearl, and would soon become a crucible for acts like Hank Williams and beyond. Being welcomed into the Opry's family gave Foley national exposure every Saturday night, piping his voice into living rooms across the South and Midwest, forging a bond between him and listeners as far away as the coasts. In the background of all this professional success, Foley's personal story churned on. The grief from Eva's death lingered, but something unexpected happened. In 1944, he married Judy Martin. Yes, the very sister of his late wife. Judy's real name was Eva Marine Overstake, so the connection ran deep. The tabloids of the time must have had a field day with that story, but perhaps it made sense on a personal level. Judy shared so much of Eva's background, possibly providing a sense of comfort or continuity. They had a daughter, Betty, born in 1945. But even that relationship faced its storms, eventually culminating in a divorce in 1952. There were rumors of Foley's ongoing struggles. He was chasing stardom and dealing with personal guilt and heartbreak, a dangerous cocktail that no doubt rattled his relationships. Amid all that turmoil, Foley was also making history on the airwaves. In 1946, he moved to Nashville to host the Prince Albert Show, effectively the Grand Ole Opry's first nationally broadcast segment on NBC Radio. Before that, the Opry was mostly a regional phenomenon. This new show meant that the entire country could tune in. Foley's friendly, warm style suited the broadcast perfectly. He'd speak to audiences almost like a neighbor, bridging the gap between city dwellers and rural folk, giving them all a taste of that Grand Ole Opry magic. So in a very real sense, Red Foley helped catapult country music into mainstream American life. By 1950, he experienced one of his greatest commercial triumphs with Chattanooga Shoeshine Boy, a cheerful, bouncy song that soared to #1 on both the country and pop charts. An incredible feat for a country singer in that era. If you imagine the musical landscape back then, country rarely crossed over into mainstream pop. Yet Foley's easygoing charm and catchy melodies led him into households that otherwise might have stuck to big band jazz or crooners. Chattanooga Shoeshine Boy was everywhere, from jukeboxes and small-town diners to big city radio stations, introducing countless new listeners to Red Foley's brand of music. He followed up with further hits like Sugarfoot Rag and Midnight, each demonstrating that unique ability to toggle between country and a more general pop style, albeit with a Southern twist. Then came Peace in the Valley in 1951, a gospel recording that sold more than 1 million copies, a massive achievement. Gospel was dear to Foley's heart, and the success of Peace in the Valley cemented his role as one of country music's first big crossover gospel stars. Religious music had long been part of the rural soundscape, but rarely did it fuse so comfortably with mainstream commercial success. People connected with Foley's sincerity, that sense that he wasn't just singing about faith, but living it. It might have been a tender reflection of the personal trials he'd been through, heartbreak, guilt, and the quest for redemption, all swirling beneath that earnest performance of a gospel tune. In the same year, his daughter Shirley married Pat Boone. Yes, that Pat Boone, meaning Red Foley, had just become father-in-law to a future pop icon, forging yet another surprising link in the greater lineage of American popular music. There was, however, a glimmer of stability on the horizon. In 1953, Foley married for the third time to Sally Sweet, which proved to be a lasting union. By now, though, the music industry around him was shifting. Rock and roll was erupting onto the scene, rewriting the playbook of youth culture, radio playlists, and chart dominance. While Foley remained a beloved figure in country circles, he sensed the mainstream pivoting away from folksy crooners. That didn't stop him, of course. He still had plenty to offer. From 1954 to 1956, he hosted Ozark Jubilee on ABC TV, the first national television series dedicated to country music. Imagine the impact. Families across the nation could finally watch, not just hear, their favorite country artists performing. The show introduced new talents like Brenda Lee, who would go on to become a rockabilly and pop phenomenon. In this sense, Foley played the role of a mentor, bridging generations of country artists, even as his own star might have begun to wane. As the 1960s arrived, Foley faced more personal upheavals. He battled alcohol, a struggle that many country artists of his time also faced. The rigorous schedule of performing, coupled with personal regrets and the relentless pressure to stay relevant, weighed heavily on him. Add to that mounting financial troubles, particularly tax debts, and his once sterling public image started to tarnish. If you read fan accounts from those days, some mention that Foley seemed tired, occasionally showing up to gigs looking worn, but he never lost the fundamental warmth that endeared him to generations of fans. He continued making appearances at the Grand Ole Opry, now a living legend among younger acts who revered him as a forebear of modern country. Foley's final act came suddenly. On September 19, 1968, at the relatively young age of 58, he died unexpectedly in a Fort Wayne, Indiana hotel room right after performing Peace in the Valley alongside Billy Walker. The official cause was respiratory failure linked to a heart attack. In a haunting twist, Hank Williams Jr. was the one who discovered Foley unresponsive. That shocking moment underscored the ephemeral nature of show business. No matter how revered or talented you are, fate can swoop in without warning. For fans and colleagues, his death felt abrupt and far too soon, cutting off a man who had contributed so much to the bedrock of country music. Poignantly, just a year before his passing in 1967, Foley was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame. You could call it a small mercy or cosmic timing, ensuring that he received that formal recognition while he was still alive. The Hall of Fame nod served as an official acknowledgement that Red Foley had shaped American country music in a pivotal way, bridging the old-time rural sounds with the mainstream, introducing a gospel dimension that sold 1 million copies, and offering an affable presence on some of the earliest coast-to-coast country broadcasts. Now, decades after his death, the question arises, how does Red Foley's legacy live on? Younger generations might not immediately recognize his name, overshadowed as it is by more famous luminaries like Hank Williams or Elvis Presley. And yet, if you start tracing the threads of country's evolution, Foley's fingerprints appear everywhere. He left behind more than 30 hits, from Smoke on the Water, no relation to the Deep Purple rock track, of course, to New Jolie Blonde and Alabama Jubilee. Each track was another piece of the puzzle, showing off his skill at weaving together traditional fiddles, steel guitars, and a pop-friendly polish. So if you ever find yourself craving a slice of that old-time country radio charm, or wanting a taste of the earliest gospel crossovers, seek out Red Foley's catalog. Let that baritone guide you back to a different era, one that might feel simpler but was every bit as complex behind the curtain. You'll hear heartbreak and hope in equal measures, and you'll understand why for one shining moment in mid-century America, the nation paused to listen to a red-headed boy from Kentucky who grew up to become Mr. Country Music. And as you listen, keep in mind that behind those sweet tunes was a life story of triumph and tragedy, a testament that even the brightest stage lights can't chase away all shadows. That intersection of joy and sorrow, that's the beating heart of country music itself, and Red Foley embodied it like few others ever have.